So one of the key building blocks other than active listening is really how to formulate good and effective questions. So again, why is questions important? Because we want to have the client involved in his or her experience, knowledge, and resources, right? It's from their perspective, they finding the solutions to their development. So what's important in asking good questions? Well, first things, they need to be simple. You can't have two questions at the same time, one question at a time. Short questions are often much more effective than long, elaborate questions. Things like, what do you think? What is the goal for the session? What's the obstacles? Those are short type of questions. They don't have to be long. So questions must be open-ended. So if you ask a yes or no question, that's not would that be effective? The answer to that is yes or no, or you can even maybe add maybe, but that's not an open-ended question. An open-ended question is what would make that effective? That's an open-ended question. I think those things are key in how you answer questions. Another great thing and a tool to do is to scale. It uses scale in questions, and you can do that with seeing commitment. Like if you ask somebody what's the goal for this session, and the goal might be something like, I really want to improve how I handle conflict. So you can say, well, let's talk about, if you would rate it from 1 to 10 at this stage, where do you think you're at in how you handle conflict? Is it a 5, a 3, or 8? What is it? And then they could say, well, let's say it's a 3. You can then ask, what makes it a 3? And then they describe that. You can say, so where do you want to end up? And they could say, oh, I want to be a 10. Okay, but what does a 10 look like for you? And how long do you think it would take? So 10 might be like the communication professor, maybe 8. Now, remember, it's them choosing. So they can choose a 10, but sometimes people put a lot of pressure on themselves. So you might want to ask, so where do you want to be after the coaching experience? Maybe there's not just the first session, but there's a couple of sessions. Oh, I want to be a 6 or a 7. Okay, so what do we have to do to move from a 3-4 to a 6-7? And that's a nice way of creating a path of what needs to happen, helping people to develop. Another thing to remember is to not use questions that's actually suggestions. And the classical one of that is, don't you think that this could help? Just because there's a question mark doesn't mean that it's actually a question. That's a suggestion. So you got to be careful of that. Remember, it's the client that needs to find the answers. Suggestions comes from your side and actually not from the client side. And the other important thing, final thing, remember, if you ask questions, it's their answers. It owns their responsibility. The commitment to actually put it into action is much more than from when the suggestion comes from your side. That's another reason to really focus on asking good questions. That's about questions.